The radio check came back clean. Too clean. For men lay prone on a ridgeline above the Helmand River Valley, 1,200 meters from the compound. No movement. No chatter. No thermal signatures beyond livestock and cooling mud walls. The feed from the RQ-7B Shadow drone confirmed it again. Empty. They had been watching for 11 hours. Temperature had dropped to 4 degrees Celsius. Wind pushing east at 12 knots. Dust settling into optics, into teeth, into patience. Still nothing. The patrol commander adjusted his Schmidt and Binder optic, scanning the same doorway for the 100th time. The intelligence packet had been precise. Courier traffic. Night movement. High-value facilitator linked to Taliban logistics networks operating between Sanjin and Kajaki. Every pattern had pointed here, and yet the compound was silent. Behind them, 15 kilometers out, an Australian Army CH-47F Chinook sat cold on a dirt LZ. Engines off, crew waiting under blackout conditions. Extraction window closing in 3 hours. Higher up the chain, inside a coalition operations room at Kandahar Airfield, analysts from the Australian Defence Intelligence Organization cross-referenced signals intercepts with U.S. Task Force Orange inputs. The metadata still aligned. The pattern still held. On paper, the target was inside. On the ground, there was nothing. This was not the first time. Over the past 6 weeks, multiple ISR platforms had tracked the same network. US NQ, 9 Reapers. British Desert Hawk, 3 systems. Persistent surveillance. Pattern of life analysis refined down to minutes. Each time, the same conclusion. Each time, the same absence. The patrol did not move. That was the doctrine. For operators from the Special Air Service Regiment, call sign withdrawn into silence, operating beyond vehicle support, beyond quick reaction force range. Autonomous. Self-contained. No margin for error. They had inserted on foot the previous night, 8-hour approach march across broken irrigation ditches and hard-packed compounds, carrying 48-hour sustainment loads. No fires. No light. No signatures. They were exactly where the system said they needed to be. And the system was not working. A faint flicker appeared on thermal. 1 second. Maybe less. Not inside the compound. Behind it. Then gone. No confirmation. No pattern. No second chance. The patrol commander didn't speak. He just watched the dead space behind the wall, where the drone couldn't see, where the intelligence had never looked. Everything said the target was here. Everything visible said he wasn't. And somewhere between those two realities, something was moving. They had already tried force. 3 weeks earlier, a joint task group built around U.S. Army Rangers from 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, had executed a night raid less than 8 kilometers from this position. The objective had been similar. Same network. Same courier chain. Different compound. Insertion had been textbook. 2 MH-47G Chinooks from the 160th SOR came in low, terrain masking through the river valley, rotors cutting through the dust, at 0-200 local. Rangers fast roped onto the objective, perimeter established in under 90 seconds. ISR had confirmed movement inside prior to landing. By the time the breach charge detonated, the compound was empty. Not abandoned. Vacated. Cooking fires still warm. 1 radio left powered. A motorcycle missing. The target had left less than 4 minutes before boots hit the ground. No one saw him leave. Signals intelligence from Task Force Orange had placed his device inside the compound up until the moment of assault. The geolocation error margin was less than 5 meters. Still, he was gone. They called it a timing issue. They adjusted. 2 nights later, British Special Air Service operators under Task Force Black ran a parallel operation west of Sanjin. Smaller footprint. 8-man assault element supported by an Overwatch sniper pair equipped with L115A3 rifles and thermal sights. They inserted by RAF Chinook, 3 kilometers offset, final approach on foot to reduce acoustic signature. The surveillance window lasted 6 hours. At 0117, a single individual entered the compound. At 0129, the assault force moved. At 0136, they breached. Inside, they found 2 elderly men. No weapons. No radios. No signs of recent military activity. The individual observed entering had disappeared inside a structure with no secondary exit. Walls were intact. No tunnels detected. The ISR feed had shown him walk in. No one saw him leave. The report used careful language. Possible concealed movement. Potential structural anomaly. Inconclusive. No one said what it meant. The system continued to build confidence in its own model. More drones, more coverage, more data. Patterns became sharper. Predictions became faster. And still, every operation arrived seconds too late, or minutes too early, or exactly on time, with nothing there. Australian Special Air Service Regiment patrols had been feeding into this system for months, operating deep across Helmand's green zone, mapping irrigation routes, identifying compounds, tracking human movement the way it had been done long before drones. Small teams, 4 to 6 operators, no vehicles, no visible presence. They reported inconsistencies, foot traffic that didn't align with ISR timelines, couriers appearing in locations where no drone had tracked them, compounds that seemed inactive from above but carried subtle signs of use on the ground, freshly disturbed soil, heat retained in shaded walls long after sunset. Their reports were logged, cross-referenced, then diluted inside a system that trusted signals more than silence. Because signals could be measured, silence could not. Back at Kandahar, the targeting cell adjusted the parameters again. They tightened the strike windows, reduced the delay between detection and action, integrated more real-time feeds from U.S. National Security Agency intercept platforms. Latency became the enemy. Speed became the solution. The assumption held. If they could move faster than the target, they could catch him. So they accelerated. Another raid, this time led by elements of DEVGRU, deployed under JSOC authority. High-priority target designation. Full-spectrum support. Predator drones maintained continuous ISR coverage. Signals intercept teams monitored known frequencies. Satellite assets provided overhead confirmation. The compound was observed for 14 continuous hours. No movement in or out. At 0240, a single heat signature appeared inside. At 0247, DEVGRU operators inserted via MH-60 Black Hawks, landing 200 meters short to avoid detection. They moved fast. Controlled aggression. Breach at 0253. Inside, they found weapons caches, documents, fresh tea, and an empty room where the heat signature had been 7 minutes earlier. 7 minutes. No exit observed. No movement detected. No explanation that fit the data. By now, the pattern was undeniable. Every unit involved had executed correctly. Rangers, SAS, DEVGRU, different doctrines, different insertion methods. Same result. They were not being outgunned. They were being outpaced. But not in speed. In understanding. The system responded the only way it knew how. It demanded more data, more surveillance, more confirmation. Because the assumption still felt solid. The target was inside the pattern. He had to be. Everything pointed to it. Everything except reality. The problem was never the compound. It was never the timing. It was never even the target. The system believed it was tracking a man. It wasn't. It was tracking a signal. And those two things had quietly separated weeks ago. Task Force Orange had built its model the way it always did. Layered signals intelligence over known behavioral patterns. Device tracking. Frequency analysis. Contact chains. Movement correlation across multiple districts. On a screen in Kandahar, it looked precise. Clean lines connecting nodes. A courier here. A handler there. The target sitting at the center, defined by consistency. Consistency was the assumption. Every time the device appeared, the system believed the man was there. Every time the pattern repeated, the system believed it was learning. But the ground told a different story. SASR patrols moving through irrigation corridors at night had started to notice something subtle. Not absence. Misalignment. Footprints that led into compounds hours after the drone feed showed no movement. Local farmers who changed routes without visible cause. Dogs reacting to presence before any ISR platform registered heat. The pattern existed, but it was not synchronized with the signal. The problem was not that the target was escaping. The problem was that the system was arriving at the wrong version of reality. Signals intelligence had latency, not in transmission, but in meaning. A device could remain. A man could move. A courier could carry both, or neither. In Helmand's green zone, where compounds were built wall to wall with narrow irrigation ditches cutting through them like arteries, movement did not follow open terrain logic. It folded. Men moved through compounds without touching open ground. Walls connected to walls. Families connected to families. A man could travel 500 meters without ever appearing in open air. Drones saw from above, but they did not see inside. Thermal imaging could detect heat, but it could not interpret intent. The system had built its confidence on visibility. The environment operated on concealment. And the target understood that difference long before the system did. He did not avoid surveillance. He let it see what it expected. The device remained inside compounds long enough to confirm pattern of life analysis, long enough to trigger ISR validation, long enough to initiate a strike cycle. Then it stopped matching, because the man was already somewhere else, sometimes 200 meters away, sometimes 2 kilometers, moving through human terrain, not physical space. No drone could track that. No signal could define it. The SASR patrols understood this instinctively, but they couldn't prove it inside the system. Their reports lacked confirmation. No ISR backing. No intercept validation. Just ground observation. And ground observation was treated as incomplete data because it couldn't scale, because it couldn't be automated, because it relied on something the system did not trust. Human interpretation. At the operational level, decisions were made inside a loop. Detection, confirmation, action. Each step required validation from multiple sources. Signals, ISR, pattern history. The chain of command reinforced it. Australian SASR patrol commanders reported up through Special Operations Task Group channels. Intelligence flowed into coalition fusion cells. From there, targeting recommendations moved through JSOC coordination elements. Every layer demanded certainty. Every layer filtered out ambiguity. By the time a decision reached execution units, it was clean. Too clean. Friction had been removed. Reality had not. The target exploited that gap. He did not move faster than helicopters. He moved earlier than decisions. He understood the delay between detection and action. He understood how long confirmation took. He understood that the system needed to be sure. So he gave it something to be sure about. A signal, a pattern, a location, all accurate, all irrelevant. The operations kept failing because they were solving the wrong problem. They were trying to capture a man inside a system built to track devices. They believed speed would close the gap, but speed only made the gap harder to see. Because the faster they moved, the more they trusted the signal. And the more they trusted the signal, the further they moved from the man. The SASR teams on the ground didn't say this directly. They didn't need to. They just kept reporting the same thing in different ways. The pattern is correct. The conclusion is not. And somewhere between those two sentences, the system began to fracture. The shift did not begin with a directive. It began with hesitation. On the ground, hesitation is usually a failure point, a delay in movement, a missed window, a moment where initiative collapses under uncertainty. But this was different. This hesitation came from experience. An SASR patrol commander, callsign withheld like the rest, received the updated target packet through the Special Operations Task Group network just before last. Light. Same structure. Same confidence level. High-value facilitator. Pattern confirmed across multiple ISR platforms. Signals intelligence validated by coalition intercept teams. Everything aligned. Which was exactly the problem. He had seen this alignment before. Every clean pattern ended the same way. Empty compounds. Warm tea. No target. The chain of command expected movement. The request for action had already passed through Australian Special Operations Command liaison officers embedded within coalition headquarters. JSOC coordination elements had cleared the operational window. ISR assets were already tasked. The system was ready. All it needed was execution. Instead, the patrol did nothing. They inserted as planned. Night movement. 8-hour foot approach through agricultural belts and irrigation cuts, stepping over low mud walls, avoiding silhouetting against the horizon. Each man carrying just under 50 kilograms. Ammunition, optics, water, batteries. No redundancy beyond necessity. They reached the observation point before midnight. And then they stopped. No request for immediate action. No push for assault authorization. They watched. At the operational level, this created friction. Inside the coalition fusion cell at Kandahar, analysts flagged the delay. ISR coverage was active. Signals still indicated device presence inside the compound. The window for a coordinated strike, air and ground, was open. The expectation was clear. Confirm and act. Instead, the SASR patrol submitted a different kind of report. No visible pattern change. No confirmation of target presence. Observation ongoing. It was incomplete. Worse, it was inconclusive. That slowed everything above them. Requests for clarification moved up through the Australian Special Operations Task Group command structure. Liaison officers relayed the uncertainty into a system that did not handle uncertainty well. JSOC planners adjusted timelines. ISR assets were held longer than scheduled, burning fuel, reallocating coverage from other sectors. All of it for a patrol that refused to act on confirmed intelligence. From a distance, it looked inefficient. From the ground, it was the first accurate move. The SASR doctrine had never depended on speed. It depended on endurance. Small teams operating independently, often beyond immediate support, built their advantage not through force, but through time. Time to observe. Time to notice what didn't fit. Time to let the environment reveal its own logic. They were not trying to intercept a moment. They were trying to understand a system. The patrol extended observation past the expected window. 6 hours became 10. 10 became 14. Temperature dropped further. Condensation formed along weapon systems and optics. Batteries degraded in the cold. Hydration levels dropped below optimal thresholds. Still they watched. The drone feed continued to show the same thing. Nothing. Signals intelligence continued to report the same thing. Presence. Two realities, running in parallel, refusing to converge. By early morning, higher command began to shift its posture. Not because of new data, because of the absence of resolution. The original assumption, target inside compound, had been reinforced repeatedly by the system, but it had failed repeatedly in practice. Now, for the first time, a unit on the ground was refusing to validate it. That created a different kind of pressure. Not tactical, institutional. Inside the decision chain, authority began to redistribute. JSOC planners reduced the urgency of immediate action. ISR tasking was extended, but with modified priority. Australian command elements allowed the patrol greater autonomy than standard doctrine would normally permit. Not as a strategy, as an exception. Exceptions are where doctrine starts to change. The SASR patrol adjusted its focus. Not on the compound, on everything around it. They mapped foot traffic across adjacent fields, counted movement between compounds that were not part of the original target set, noted timing differences between visible activity and expected patterns derived from ISR. They began to build a different picture, one that did not rely on signals, one that could not be confirmed from above, movement that existed in gaps, transitions that occurred between surveillance cycles, human behavior that did not register as data because it was too inconsistent to model. And slowly, without announcing it, they stopped hunting the man inside the compound. They started tracking the system that moved him. No formal directive marked the change. No briefing acknowledged it. But on that ridgeline, under diminishing battery life and tightening extraction windows, a different doctrine had already taken hold. Not faster, not more precise, just quieter. And for the first time, aligned with reality. They moved on the second night, not toward the compound, away from it. The decision never passed through Kandahar. No formal approval. No updated tasking order. The patrol commander adjusted internally, inside the authority he already held. That was the advantage of distance. 15 kilometers from the nearest friendly element. No quick reaction force. No overwatch that could intervene in time. Autonomy was not granted. It was enforced by geography. The patrol broke position at 2,100 local. Temperature hovering at 6 degrees Celsius. Wind had dropped, carrying sound further across the flat irrigation fields. Movement had to be slower now, more deliberate. They stepped off in single file. No white light. No comms beyond hand signals and low-power inter-team radios set to whisper mode. Each man carried a suppressed state route 25 or 417 Hong Kong dollars, backed by a minimi para configured for short bursts, not sustained fire. This was not an assault. It was a transition. They moved along the irrigation cuts first. Narrow channels, knee-deep in stagnant water, bordered by mud walls just high enough to break silhouette. Progress slowed to less than 1 kilometer per hour. Boots sank. Every step required placement. Distance to the next observation point was 1.8 kilometers. It took them nearly 3 hours. Halfway through, they stopped. Not because of contact, because of absence. The patrol commander had been tracking a pattern since the previous day. Not from ISR. From memory. A single farmer who had crossed a field at irregular intervals. Not tied to prayer times. Not aligned with irrigation schedules. Inconsistent. Which made it reliable. They had seen him once at dusk. Then not again. Now, in the same field, at the same approximate time window, there was no movement. No thermal signature. No sound. The absence was wrong. They shifted direction 10 degrees east. Subtle. No discussion. Another 400 meters forward, they found it. A narrow break in a compound wall, partially concealed by stacked debris. Not visible from above. Not large enough to register as a point of interest in any ISR model. But used. Fresh disturbance in the soil. Edges recently compressed. Traffic had passed through within hours. Beyond it, a corridor. Not a tunnel. A sequence. Compounds linked wall to wall. Internal doorways cut between structures, forming a continuous path shielded from aerial observation. Movement could occur entirely within this network, invisible to drones, invisible to thermal except in fragments. This was how the target moved. Not across terrain. Through it. The patrol split. 2 operators established a static overwatch on the corridor entrance. The other 2 moved deeper, slow, controlled, clearing each transition point with IR strobes and short-range optics. Distance between elements never exceeded 50 meters. Comms remained minimal. Time stretched. At 0120, they saw the first movement. A figure, mid-height, carrying no visible weapon, moving through the internal corridor at a steady pace. Not rushed. Not cautious. Familiar. This was not a man evading detection. This was a man operating inside a system he trusted. The lead operator tracked him through a narrow doorway using a PVS-31 night vision system. No clear facial identification. No biometric confirmation. That didn't matter. The pattern was different. The man was not inside the compound. He was moving between them. The patrol did not engage. That was the break. Every previous operation would have triggered at this point. Positive movement. High probability target. Close distance. Instead, they followed. Offset by one compound. Maintaining parallel movement through external alleys while the target moved internally. They used sound, not sight. Footsteps through mud floors. Faint contact against wooden doors. Distance fluctuated between 30 and 70 meters. At 0138, the target stopped. Inside a structure not previously identified in any intelligence packet. No ISR coverage. No signals history. No pattern. Just a place that existed outside the system. The patrol consolidated. All 4 operators now positioned around the structure, maintaining 360-degree coverage. No immediate breach. They waited. 7 minutes passed. Then 12. At 19 minutes, a second individual entered the structure from the opposite side. Different route. Same corridor network. This was the node. Not the compound from the original targeting packet. Not the location validated by signals. This. A meeting point that existed between patterns. The patrol commander made the call. Quietly. No request for external authorization. No time for ISR confirmation. Because ISR could not see this. The breach was manual. No explosive entry. Too loud. Too final. They used mechanical tools. Silent pry on the rear access point. One operator slipped inside first, clearing left, then right. Tight interior. Mud walls. One central room. 2 individuals inside. One seated. One standing. Both turned too late. Controlled engagement. 2 shots. Suppressed. Center mass. No follow-up required. Total time inside, 14 seconds. No alarms. No external movement. The patrol exfiltrated the same way they entered. Through the corridor. Through the break in the wall. Back into the irrigation lines. By 0300, they were gone. 15 kilometers later, at first light, the Chinook lifted them out. Behind them, the compound identified by the system remained untouched. Still empty. Still correct. Still irrelevant. Confirmation did not come from ISR. It came from absence. No follow-on movement. No reappearance of the signal in adjacent sectors. No reconstitution of the courier chain that had fed the network for months. The device that Task Force Orange had tracked so precisely went silent. Not degraded. Not displaced. Gone. Back in Kandahar, the fusion cell registered the change within 6 hours. Signals intercept teams scanned known frequencies. Nothing. Pattern of life models attempted to rebuild activity across secondary nodes. The network did not adapt. It collapsed. Reports moved upward through the same chain that had previously reinforced certainty. Australian Special Operations Task Group submitted contact debrief. Tom on target. 2 enemy Kia. No friendly casualties. Minimal signature. JSOC coordination elements cross-referenced the timeline with ISR logs. There was a gap. No drone had visual on the structure. No satellite pass had captured movement. No signals intercept had confirmed presence prior to engagement. By the system's standards, The target had never been there. And yet, everything that followed indicated he had. Interrogation of captured materials, documents retrieved during the 14-second clearance, provided fragments. Handwritten ledgers, route markings, names without full identifiers. Enough for analysts to begin reconstructing the human network that had existed beneath the signal layer. It was smaller than expected, less structured, more adaptive. It did not rely on continuous communication. It relied on timing, familiarity, and physical pathways invisible to external observation. The man they had been tracking was not important because of where he stayed. He was important because of how he moved. And that movement had stopped. Coalition reporting adjusted carefully. No definitive statement linked the kill to the high-value target designation. Language remained conditional. Assessed. Likely. High confidence, but not confirmed. Because confirmation required data. And data, in this case, had never seen the event. Still, operational behavior across the area changed. IED emplacement rates along the Sangin-Kajaki corridor dropped within 10 days. Courier activity decreased. Known facilitators shifted locations, abandoning previously consistent routes. Not in panic. In uncertainty. Something had disrupted the system. But they could not identify what. The original compound, the one validated by weeks of ISR and signals intelligence, remained under intermittent surveillance. Nothing changed there. Because nothing had ever been there. The patrol returned to base without recognition. No deviation was recorded in official summaries. No doctrinal shift announced. The system absorbed the outcome without fully understanding the method. It registered success, but not the reason for it. And that difference remained. Nothing in the system officially changed. The same ISR platforms continued to orbit above Helmand. MQ-9 Reapers traced the same grid patterns. Signals intelligence teams kept mapping frequencies, building networks out of invisible connections. Targeting cells still moved through the same cycle. Detection, confirmation, action. On paper, the machine remained intact. But something had shifted underneath it. Quietly, without permission. The SASR patrol had not introduced new technology. They had not accelerated the process. They had not improved the accuracy of the system. They had stepped outside it. And that created a problem no system is designed to solve. Because systems depend on consistency, and reality does not. In the weeks that followed, small adjustments began to appear. Not in doctrine, not in official briefings, but in behavior. Patrol reports from Australian Special Operations Task Group started carrying more weight. Not because they were more detailed, but because they contradicted clean patterns. Contradictions had previously been filtered out. Now they were retained. Not trusted, but not ignored. ISR tasking shifted in subtle ways. Longer observation windows. Less emphasis on immediate action. More tolerance for delay. From a distance, it looked inefficient. From the ground, it started to resemble understanding. Other units began to adapt, though not all at once. Elements of the 2nd Commando Regiment operating in adjacent sectors reduced reliance on real-time signals confirmation. British SAS teams under evolving task force structures began extending surveillance beyond validated patterns, focusing on peripheral movement instead of central nodes. Not because they were told to, because the old way kept failing. The change did not spread through orders. It spread through results. Operators talked. Quietly. After missions. Between rotations. What worked? What didn't? What the system said. What the ground showed. And slowly, a different assumption replaced the old one. The signal is not the target. The signal is a shadow. That shift altered everything. Because once that assumption breaks, speed loses its advantage. Precision becomes questionable. And control becomes an illusion. The system had been built on the belief that more data would lead to more clarity. But Helmand had exposed something else. More data can create more distance. Distance between observation and meaning. Distance between pattern and reality. Distance between action and understanding. The SASR teams had never tried to eliminate that distance. They operated inside it. Small patrols. Autonomous. No guarantee of support. No continuous oversight. Just 4 to 6 men moving through terrain that did not reveal itself easily, relying on time, memory, and judgment. Things that could not be uploaded. Things that could not be scaled. That was their advantage. And also their limitation. Because what they did could not be replicated across the entire system. It required patience in an environment built for speed. It required uncertainty in a structure that demanded confirmation. It required restraint where doctrine rewarded action. Most organizations resist that because it looks like hesitation. And hesitation, in war, is often punished. But here, hesitation had done something else. It had removed the illusion. The illusion that control could be achieved through surveillance alone. The illusion that patterns were reality. The illusion that the target existed where the system said he did. They had everything. Drones, satellites, intercepts, algorithms refined through years of conflict. They still couldn't see him. Not until they stopped looking the way they were trained to. The operation was never about capturing a single facilitator. It was about exposing a flaw, a mismatch between method and environment, between how the system thought the war worked and how it actually did. That mismatch did not disappear. It never does. It just becomes visible. And once it becomes visible, it forces a choice. Adapt, or continue operating inside a model that no longer reflects reality. Most systems choose slowly. Some never choose at all. But on that ridgeline, in the cold, with no confirmation and no certainty, for men had already made the decision. They didn't move faster. They didn't strike harder. They understood earlier. And in that gap between understanding and action, they found something the system couldn't generate. Not information, not speed, not control, just clarity. And in that environment, clarity was enough.